For 20 years, Blizzard Entertainment is a name that has been synonymous with quality gaming. Their first big break came in the form of one of the first entries in the real-time strategy genre, a fantasy epic called Warcraft, Orcs and Humans in 1994. With its balanced gameplay and involving storyline, it drew in gamers and began a legacy that has since come to define the company. The sequel, Warcraft 2: Tides of Darkness in 1995, was a runaway success that put the first game's success to shame. Recognizing that they had a strong fan base and that the mythology of their world was proving deep enough to explore on its own, they decided to go off and make an old-school adventure game called Warcraft Adventures. Sadly, Adventures did not live up to Blizzard's own insanely high standards, and rather than release a so-so product, they canceled it. Shortly afterwards, the company announced Warcraft 3: Reign of Chaos, another RTS. It seemed that the Warcraft brand was destined to stay in the strategy space, and no doubt would continue to be successful within it. So it came as a shock to the gaming world when, at London's European Computer Trade Show in 2001, they announced that they were bringing the franchise down to the individual level. They'd be taking their mythology and crafting entire continents around it, breathing life into aspects only hinted at before, and creating an experience so expansive that thousands of players could exist simultaneously and yet never run out of things to do.
You know, when we looked at the Warcraft franchise, we really felt like this is a universe that we've invested so much into. It's really deep, it's got a lot of history, it's got a lot of potential. It would be really cool if you could really get immersed in this world and see it from a completely different perspective, and so it just seemed like the right fit.
It was absolutely unexpected, and nobody was quite sure if the strategy games world would work up close and personal. Everyone knew that commanding armies was fun, but the question remained, did anybody really want to live in the world of Warcraft? At the turn of the millennium, the entire genre of MMORPG, a mighty mouthful meaning massively multiplayer online role-playing game, was booming. MMOs gave players the ability to live in an enormous world with plenty of opportunities for exploration, and since the whole thing was online, the chance to do it with friends. But these games tended to have a lot of what was called downtime, time spent either recovering from battles or traveling between locations. In other words, a big portion of the game was spent not playing the game. But strangely enough, the guys who noticed that this might be a problem for the genre didn't work in that genre. They were RTS players who had made a legendary game called StarCraft.
The development team was a team that split off from the StarCraft team when we finished StarCraft Brood War. Part of the team started working on Warcraft 3, and then the other portion of the team wanted to do something new. They actually started working on a squad-based RPG that at the time the working title was called Nomad. You know, as the Nomad project was progressing and it wasn't really shaping up, we decided to change direction for the team. A lot of the guys at the time had been playing Ultima Online, started playing EverQuest. We're really enjoying that experience, but really felt like we could put a lot more polish on the user experience as it relates to an MMO.
Crafting an MMO was not an easy task. The first M means massive, and for good reason. To support thousands of players at once, and to keep them all interested, the game world needed to be tremendous. Beyond that, it would have to have enough narrative content in it to give them a reason to come back again and again. Other MMO developers had understood this and made huge game worlds. What they hadn't understood was that the game itself had to be exciting, or there was no point in visiting that world in the first place. Blizzard, by setting their MMO in their own established game world, had plenty of geography and art direction to start from. This allowed them to concentrate more on the actual game without compromising the integrity of the space.
You know, one of our corporate values is gameplay first, and that's about the user experience and making sure that the quality of the game is where it needs to be and that it's an immersive experience. When we're iterating on the project, it's about making the gameplay experience compelling and making that the priority and making it feel crisp and making it feel smooth. Probably one of the more important systems at the time was the combat system, and we definitely spent a lot of time on the combat system. In fact, we were having challenges with that, and we leveraged some of the veteran developers from the StarCraft 2 team at the time to come in and help out with spreadsheets and modeling simulations to try to figure out what we were doing and if we were doing it right.
Still, even with Blizzard's long history of gaming excellence and the rabid fan reaction to the game's 2001 announcement, World of Warcraft was never a sure thing. Even with years of Warcraft lore and art behind it, creating that much content would take a huge team years to complete. And even after all that time and money spent on a project they genuinely felt great about, there was no guarantee that it would strike a chord the way they wanted it to.
We weren't sure that the game would be successful in Europe. You know, market experts at the time were telling us there was no market for an MMO in Europe, and you know, we weren't sure about how it would be accepted in Asia either. So yeah, I mean, it was definitely a risk.
But even with Blizzard's reputation for delaying a game as long as they needed to, the game finally had to come out. Starting in early 2004, Blizzard started sending out closed beta invites. Even though this was technically a testing phase allowing Blizzard to change the game based on players' reactions, it meant the game had to be close. Finally, in early November 2004, the company formally announced that World of Warcraft would release in late November 2004. Specifically, November 23, 2004, exactly 10 years after the first Warcraft hit store shelves. At the launch, Blizzard had had high expectations. That turned out to be dramatically too low.
We had hardware infrastructure in North America to support about around 400,000 or 500,000 active subscribers, which we felt like if we achieved that in North America, we'd be successful and we could operate a successful business around the World of Warcraft game. Personally, I felt like if we achieved globally 1 million active players, that would be a huge success.
They originally thought that they would only sell 400,000 units in the game's first 12 months on the market. It sold over half that on its first day, and all of that in its first month. Because of that, Blizzard was totally unprepared for the strain gamers put on their servers. It became so bad that they actually had to stop shipping the game in order to have time to build out more servers. In other words, it was so successful that they were afraid to sell it. It's a problem most companies would love to have. There were a number of reasons for the game's incredible popularity. Obviously, the stellar reputation of Warcrafts 1, 2, and 3 gave World of Warcraft a huge fan base from the get-go. Once inside, they found an MMO that was polished to near perfection. The dreaded downtime was practically eliminated, meaning gamers could be actively having fun for the majority of their experience. Quests were numerous, varied, and interesting, as opposed to the often repetitive missions of other games. There was almost no loading time to be found, even in a world as huge as this one. It had something for solo players and groups, casual fans, and hardcore enthusiasts. It didn't punish a player severely for dying, one of the huge problem points on other MMOs. Players had to play in one of two major factions, each of which experienced different stories and quests, and gave players a reason to start a second character. Additionally, the members of these two factions could duke it out for rewards and glory, giving the game a hefty competitive edge as well. And on top of all of that was Blizzard's golden reputation. All combined, it made for a phenomenal and addicting gaming experience. There was always one more level to reach, one more quest to try, and one more weapon to obtain. Once again, Blizzard Entertainment had done it. After years of hard work, their biggest game to date had become their biggest success to date.
The biggest driver has to have been word of mouth. We had a lot of people that tried it, experienced it, found it to be really compelling, and became huge advocates for the experience. And I think that's the biggest factor. I mean, I think that still goes on today.
But oddly enough, that didn't mean they could rest easy. Even with all the content they'd created, they knew their rabid fan base would complete it all pretty soon. And since every gamer had to pay a monthly fee to play the game, they were expecting something back from the developer. And so, Blizzard had a quest of their own to expand on their most expansive game. Tune in next time to see World of Warcraft's success defy belief.